Good morning. PDA TX Live here at the Liberty Bar this morning with Bankers Anonymous, who's teaching a class at Trinity University this semester and cannot join us live in the studio in the afternoon. So we're here this morning having our coffee, looking at the news and talking about the hot topics of the day. Good morning.
Morning, Elaine.
How's everything at Bankers Anonymous?
Very good. Things are hopping.
Yeah.
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, especially thanks to the latest headlines.
Forbes released the 1,426 world billionaires yesterday, which is very exciting.
Which is an increase, right? A dramatic increase in billionaires?
It's been a good year for billionaires. Yeah. I was not on the list, which as we were talking about before, I'm considering not participating with Forbes next year. If they're not going to include me in the list, it's very upsetting.
So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
How is the list compiled, right? Because it's not like the stuff is public record, all of it, people's fortunes and...
They have a methodology. Mm-hmm. They have ways of accessing assets. I'm not privy to it. They're now competing with Bloomberg, which has its own list. But there are people like, famously, Prince Al-Walid said, I don't like your methodology. You left off about $10 billion of my personal net worth. Trump has similarly complained about this stuff. He doesn't like it when these guys,
yeah, there's some people who don't want
too much is never enough. And then there's other people who don't want to be on the list. That's right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Forbes has been doing this now for over 25 years, right? What have we learned about billionaires? I know they said a couple years ago there was a lot of drop in the list because of a drop in net worth and assets, right? Why was this past year a really good year for billionaires?
We talk about a recession, but there's no recession for billionaires. Billionaires have most of their net worth is typically highly concentrated equity wealth in the businesses that they either started or that they've been running, and businesses are profitable. We have a recession, that's an employment recession, but people who have high net worth and started the year last year with high net worth typically are going to see an extraordinary return on their own businesses. So, you own a business and the business is profitable, which many are.
Yeah. So is it a bellwether? So when billionaires are doing better, does it mean the global economy is doing better, or does it have any relationship to our life at all? Does it have any meaning for our life at all that there's more billionaires?
Interestingly, and I'll use this opportunity to talk about a book I just reviewed on my own site called Plutocrats. There's increasingly a divide between billionaires and the rest of the economy, and the concentration of wealth at the very top is so concentrated. We haven't seen this since the Gilded Age of sort of turn of the 19th into the 20th century, in which the people at the very top are so divorced from the rest of us. Unfortunately, I'm in the rest of us. Which is upsetting to me.
So, but what does that mean for the rest of us, right? I mean, when you read about the Gilded Age, we're often reading about people who are in the upper classes, right? That is the state of literature. What was life like for everybody who wasn't on the really wealthy list back then, and are there similarities to now?
I mean, undoubtedly, we've all done better. That the rising tide has helped. So that I'm sure there's no comparison to sort of health or life expectations, or the middle is way better than it was 100 years ago. That's for sure. But what is different now than it was a generation ago, or 2 generations ago, or the greatest generation coming out of World War II, is just how different the rich are from you and me now. I mean, it's super concentrated. And so when Forbes releases the list, it's a reminder that this is different. That the concentration is bigger than we've seen.
So there's been a lot of talk about this in moral terms, right? Like what it means for a country that's founded on equality of opportunity.
Right.
But is it in fact bad economically? Is it bad as a non-moral matter to have that much disparity in wealth?
As a pure economic matter?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, if you talk about fairness, it's upsetting. But is it bad for the economy? I'm not sure. I think it's an open question.
Yeah. What about just locally? So there's 7 in the paper today, right? It lists our 7 local billionaires.
San Antonio billionaires. Yeah.
7 out of 1,400 doesn't seem like a lot, right? Especially since America, I think, has the most billionaires on the list, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for a city, the 7th largest in the nation, not to have a lot of billionaires? Good, bad, indication of anything at all?
Typically billionaires are coming out from either starting or running or turning an ordinary business into something world class. So if you look at the 7 San Antonio billionaires, they're all business owners and essentially entrepreneurs who have created extraordinary value in their companies.
Red McCombs, Graham Weston.
McCombs, Charles Butt, Graham Weston, Rod Lewis, Leininger from KCI. These are world-class business leaders. So the fact that we have 7 is bigger than we had 4 3 years ago. So that's different. But if you had 20, that probably means you have closer to 20 world-class businesses being, started or run. So you'd always want, if you were looking at the number of billionaires as an indication of how many world-class businesses are happening locally, that would be probably one proxy for that. So more would be better in that sense.
So in terms of, let's talk, so you talk about how our local billionaires are workers and doers, right?
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about the list, so I was saying to you this morning, I thought the list was interesting, the international list
right.
of billionaires was interesting in part. There was a lot of fashion-related
right.
brands and names on there. There also, of course, is a lot of generational wealth and wealth
right.
that is earned in non-entrepreneurial means.
Right.
And you have a review on your website right now about plutocrats. I forget what the subtitle of that
sure.
is. Plutocrats.
The rise of the global super rich and the fall of everyone else.
Yeah, which in
right.
and of itself makes it sound very bad.
Yeah.
But so, and in it, you talk about things like there was a phrase, rent something.
Rent seeking, right.
What is rent seeking in lay terms? What does that mean?
Right, so as economist terms, it says that you are doing economic activities, they're essentially based on either a relationship or corruption or bribery or something that isn't productive. So the way I think about it is if you think of billionaires as superheroes in the United States, and we do, we celebrate them, that's the reason why the Forbes list exists. We have superheroes. And
I'm going to get you a subscription to Mother Jones.
Right, okay. so superheroes have an origin story, and so we celebrate the origin stories of our billionaire superheroes, and we say they made their money in their own lifetime. Some of the ones, and some of the San Antonio ones, started out in a nice, comfortable place, and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett started out in a comfortable upper middle class place, but they made something extraordinary. So we celebrate and we say that their origin stories are legitimate, and so they're heroes. If you were to talk about, and the author of this book, Plutocrats, Chrystia Freeland, is a Financial Times writer, she talks about the Russian oligarchs. They have an origin story which is basically a mobster story. These are smart people, clever, and often engineers, but they took advantage of the national wealth of Russia and concentrated it in their own hands like mobsters. Yeah. And similarly, there's Chinese billionaires who are extremely close, typically to the families of the Communist Party or the princelings of the original Communist Party. And in India and Mexico, which has the richest man in the world, Carlos Slim, right. He's sort of what I call on my site the Mozart of rent seeking, which means he's got a natural monopoly and ties to the government that's less legitimate than what we consider our billionaires. So where you stand on I think, the spectrum of rent seeking, which is bad and typically has to do with corruption, and pure entrepreneurship and a very legitimate origin story of a Mark Zuckerberg or a Steve Jobs who not only created world-class companies but created value and innovation and improved people's lives. That's what we think about our billionaires versus a Russian oligarch would be something different.
Yeah, and can we have a conversation about a regulatory environment and all within that, right? I mean, to a certain extent, right, there's always the, too much regulation, bad for business, but that regulatory environment also creates the space, right, in which you have a more legitimate form of wealth creation.
That's right, yeah.
And what does that mean for people down the chain in terms of business creation
and
wealth earning?
I think this is sort of the key point. If you believe that there is some check or balance on entrepreneurs such that you don't get mobster type behavior, or what economists call rent seeking, where they're capturing either the regulators or they've captured government officials through bribery or cheating or getting a transfer of public goods into private hands.
And they're also to a certain extent collecting the work product of other people through perhaps enforcement or other types of things, right? I mean, they were collecting other the fruits of their labor sometimes also.
Oh yeah. So if you think that that's illegitimate, if it's rent seeking and it's corruption, then you would have a different view of your plutocrats, your billionaires.
Yeah.
Or if you just think, well, these are just the Steve Jobs of Russia or China, you'd have a very different view and you say these people are to be celebrated, these are our superheroes. And I think for our society, we're at an interesting point, I think, in our society in which maybe the Occupy Wall Street on one side on the left and the Tea Party on the right are both saying, to me, similar things, which is our elites are not legitimate, the system is broken, and it's so corrupt that from the left or the right, we don't believe that the elite levels of society are accessible to us, and that there's something deeply, to be Hamlet, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. It's easier if you grew up in China and Russia and India or Mexico and you have that view. There's a lot to point to that view that in fact it's not legitimate in some fundamental way. And when I travel in Mexico, you get that lots and lots of people you talk to have a deep mistrust of their elites based on history. And we have a celebration. We don't mistrust our elites. So then the question is, has something changed in the United States? Do we still trust our our plutocrats? Do we still trust our billionaires? Is the regulatory system good enough? Or is it captured in some way that insidiously would undermine their legitimacy? The left and the right, or the Occupy Wall Street Tea Party, have declared that these people are not legitimate. The elites are not legitimate. And I think the middle of the United States still believes that they are, but I think it's an open question.
And that's still an aspirational thought too, though. It's based on that notion of I could do it.
Yeah, there's a famous phrase I'm not sure who to attribute to, but said something like, America's poor are just temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Like, we're all about to make it, right?
I am so temporarily embarrassed.
Oh, totally. I'm temporarily. We're both. Here we are, Liberty Bar, temporarily embarrassed. Gonna be there soon.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last quick question.
Yep.
So, our Facebook billionaires, there were like 5 of them, I think, on the young billionaires list.
Okay.
We have the most young billionaires, too, I think, out of internationally. So, there were several of them. They were at the top of the young billionaires list. Mark Zuckerberg, Eduardo Saverin, several other folks. Is that thing making money yet? What is
Facebook?
Yeah.
I don't have good insight into it. I have my brother is from old media, it's from the magazine business. And for the past 10 years, he's been saying, everybody says, get out of old media, you got to go into new media. And his response has been, well, new media is not making money yet. So why would I leave old media, which we know is dead in 20 years, but new media is not making money? That's been his view all along, and I trust him because he knows media. And he's a publisher of a major magazine, so he knows advertising and how media pays for itself. His view is always, as soon as new media figures out how to make money, I'm interested. But until then, I know I'm in a dying business, but I'm not going to move to the new business. You and I are in the social media space, and we can laugh about all the profitability.
That's right, because we are only temporarily embarrassed.
If you aggregated all the profitability of our social media, you could probably buy yourself a cup of coffee at Liberty Bar, which would be awesome. Thanks.
Bankers Anonymous, thanks very much for spending the morning with us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for the conversation. Yeah.